Good evening. It is almost 1 o'clock in the morning here. So I'm a little hushed because my family is asleep, but we came together today after overcoming when our Facebook didn't work out, and we created our Vintage Valentine. Whoop, I'm so uncoordinated with my camera. We created our Vintage Valentine project here on Zoom, and for some reason it didn't record. So I felt really bad because I know some of you were counting on the recording. So I just thought I would do a quick video to kind of hit the highlights so you have enough information to get through the project. Okay. So I'm just going to go over the components. So this isn't going to be quite as in-depth as the original lesson would have been, but hopefully it'll be enough to get you through. So the base coating and the base coating. We didn't have base coating, but we had project prep to do. So hopefully you have this much done. We started out with the heart template that was in your pattern packet. And then I had you adhere the sheet music on with matte medium. And there were instructions for this part in your packet. And I also did a prep video in the group to help out with that. And then there's a doily applied down here to the bottom of the point. If you didn't use a doily, you could use lace or scrapbook paper or any number of decorative items down here in the bottom to make yours more personal, to make it a little bit different. Use your own creativity. So the first thing that we want to do is start layering in some texture. Okay, so of course I'm going to reach for my bubble wrap and it's not right there, but never fear. I'm never short of bubble wrap. So we're doing mixed media, and one of the things with mixed media is we love layers, and we love textures, and we love to combine elements. So I'm just going to cut a piece of bubble wrap from my big stash here, and we're just going to start our first layer with wrap, and I'm going to use white paint for this. Out of the way. So let me just put some white paint out on my palette. I'm just going to use a large brush for this. And I told the ladies this afternoon, when you're going to use bubble wrap, instead of having your brush straight up and down and stroking over the bubble wrap, try laying your brush flat like this. Then you will hit just the tops of your bubble wrap. Oh, my bubble wrap seems to be a little flat. I'm going to get unique impressions. So if you lay your brush flat, you're just going to hit the tops of the bubbles with the paint, and you're not going to get paint down in between the little pillows of the bubble wrap. So when you make your impression, you're just going to get the little circles from the top, and you won't get kind of, it won't be blobby. You won't be getting the paint that's down in between if you don't have any in between. The other thing is, not that we give too much thought to this, we want this to be a creative process, but kind of just think of where your main elements are. So if I put bubble wrap impression down here in the middle, it's just going to get covered up. So while I may get some in the middle, I want to make sure I have some on the edges here where it's going to be seen. So I'm just going to lay an index card down here. So I'm just going to lay my bubble wrap down and give it a little press. Okay, see that? Get that beautiful impression. And I'm going to let some come down even on my doily. And if you get this on and it's too bold for you, which this is fine because we're going to be putting so many layers on, but you can then use a baby wipe or a damp paper towel if you wanted to lift some of that off. And I'm just showing these things because you can totally control the look that you get. You can have your bubbles be really pronounced. You can have your bubbles be more muted. Okay, see how it can just keep softening it right down with the damp paper towel. So you just get it to the point where you like it. Okay, the other thing that we want to do, I'm probably going a little bit out of order from what we did earlier today, but I'm going to dip my finger while I have the white out. My camera that shows my face kind of gets in the way of the project, doesn't it? So I'm just dipping my finger in white, and now I'm going to just drag some white along my edges. So I'm kind of going off the Valentine first to get a little deposit of paint, and then I'm coming back like this and dragging it in. And yes, I'm going a little bit over the bubbles, just another layer. I want to do this even on top of my doily, and look what happens as I run my finger over the doily. See how it catches the pattern of the doily and it really brings that out and makes it very pronounced, like highlighting the tops, which I love. And then we're going to do this again with milk chocolate to kind of distress it and give it a little grungy look. And that really, really makes the design of the doilies come out. We have our music paper down. We have doily down. That's another layer. We have the bubble wrap as another layer. And now we have this nice white going over a little bit of everything here. So we have another layer. And I'm just gonna wipe my finger off, and I'm gonna put milk chocolate down. And this is gonna be all of our background, and the project is gonna just come together on this. I'm just gonna put a tiny bit of milk chocolate, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I like to use my fingertip because I get a lot of control that way, but you could use a sponge or a dry brush if you want to. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just kind of going off the card first, and then this one's going to be a little lighter. I don't want to lose all my white. So think of this like distressing, like in the end of a project, sometimes we'll put distress ink on. So think of it in that same light, but watch what happens on the doily. You know, it just catches the pattern there. I just love that. I'm going to put a little more here. I'm not doing every edge. This really defines the edges, so it's nice. So light touch, grunges it up a little bit, ages it. It's kind of ironic when we're using such old papers, but okay. So something like this. Yours may look different. You could use other colors if you don't go for such a grungy look. You could go with different colors on your edges. One thing I didn't have the gals do today, and I'll just mention it because I realized after the fact that I didn't. We had blue haze on our blue mist. I keep calling it blue haze on our supply list that we didn't use today, and that was because the paper that printed out with kind of a darker look to it, and the paper that I used originally was white. So I used blue haze to add a little extra color, but this doesn't work quite as well if you've got paper that has a pretty heavy brownish tint or orangey tint, but just picking up a little blue haze. And what I did with this was just touched it here and there in the pattern of the doily on my original project. Just a little unexpected color here. And I didn't do it everywhere. Just here and there in the pattern. And just a little, and I'm going to put some matte medium in my brush so I get a little more flow with my paint and work that right into the matte medium. And let's see, where do I have not too much color? I'm going to tint a little here, just to show up in the camera. I think you can see it a bit. So it's just, again, to add a little more color, and maybe this would have been better done before the milk chocolate, but you can see, and maybe I'll put a little even underneath the lines from the sheet music. Be creative and do whatever kind of speaks to you as you go. Okay, just so that just gives us another color, and it adds again to the layers. So each time I'm covering up a little of the music, but it's getting covered up with more and more good stuff. So as long as we see some music peeking through, sometimes when you do a mixed media project, whatever is down on the bottom barely shows at the end. I used to have a hard time letting go of that because you build and you get a background that you really like, and then as you add more, it's changing, but it always ends up in the end when you have all your items on top and all of your layers put together, it always ends up beautiful. And so I've learned to kind of let go of what I start with. Okay, so let's set this aside. And we had dictionary paper in your download, and we're going to use this for the zinnias. Okay, and I think I'll post a list in the group, but this is based on the Victorian Tussie Mussy, which was the little flower arrangement that the Victorian ladies would carry around with them. They would be gifted to one another, sometimes the ladies to the ladies, sometimes the gentleman to a lady. Each time a little bouquet was used, there was significance to the flowers. So the flowers that I chose for this project each have a special meaning too. And so I chose flowers as if I'm giving this to you. So the zinnia means thoughts of friends, lasting affection. Those are the two main flowers. The white clover means think of me. And then they often had herbs in there because they were highly scented, and they wanted that, especially if they were traveling with them. So this one has basil for the greenery, which means good wishes. And then I added some ferns that we'll use texture paste to put those on. The fern means bound by love. And then the little yellow flowers are based on coreopsis, which means always cheerful, which is what I kind of want my projects to be. So other flowers had other meanings. Some of them may be good, some of them not so good, but I'll put a list in the group because some of them were kind of fun. So you have a circle template on your pattern packet. I'm just going to use my circle template here just to be quicker. And I'm going to tear down my paper just to make it a little easier for the camera. So we're going to use Country Red, and I had us use Coral Blush in my directions, but if the Coral Blush doesn't show up for you, if it blends too much with the Country Red, you might try Cactus Flower, or you could put a little white in with it also. So I'm gonna use, sorry, I had everything out here and I'm buried. I'm gonna use, I think, the Cactus Flower, and then we're also gonna have some Moon Yellow out. And I'm thinking I need to move my picture out of the way so you can see. So I'm gonna say goodbye to the camera, and I will keep talking you through this, and then I'll come back on at the end. So let's get rid of that. There we go. That'll be easier to see. Okay. Lynn, I know you created this project with us today, but if you happen to come back and watch this, you will be delighted to know that my cactus flower was under my chair. We have this running joke. Something goes missing during your project, that's where it ends up. Okay, so I'm going to show you two different ways to do the zinnia, and let me bring back my finished project so you can see. We're just going to do these just very simple 3 layers of petals. So the red's going to be on the outside, the pink in the middle, and then moon yellow in the very center. Okay. You can use a flat brush and kind of float them on, or you can use a filbert and pull the petals that way. I like the floated petal because I like that blend from dark to light, but I'm going to show you both ways. The filbert goes a little quicker, has a totally different look. So I'm loading my brush in matte medium. I'm going to pick up just on the corner of the brush, just like when we do any kind of floating. I'm just going to blend my brush. The matte medium keeps the paint transparent. And since we're working on dictionary paper, any paper with text, we want to see that text through. So the matte medium helps us with that. And let me zoom in a little more here. I'm just going to work on the chisel of my brush, and this is like little C strokes. And I'm actually going to let me load in a little bit more so I get a wider flow of color. I'm just going to push a C and a C. So the circle that you put on your paper was just a guide to work up against. So I'm just pushing right up against that circle. And I'm going to go all the way around. And as I need to reload, I'm just going to pick up some more paint until I get back to the beginning. And you don't even really need to rinse your brush if you don't want to between your red and your pink, but I'm going to reload with matte medium. And I'm going to go into my pink or whatever color you want to. Zinnias come in so many colors. You can do any color combination that you like. Okay, now I'm going to go in, inside first petals and do a second layer. And this one, I hope is showing up for you. It's a little hard to see this color. I'm going to load a little more than I normally would, just see if it's going to show for you. I'm going to work all the way around again until I meet petals I made in the beginning. And I'm going to go over these a little more so they show up a little better. Okay, so that's layer number 2. And let me just go to a little bit smaller brush for the inside petals. Not that small. Right, again with the matte medium. When you use matte medium in your brushes, make sure you use something like hand sanitizer, or hand sanitizer works really great to get the matte medium out. Okay, so now again, another layer. This one's small because we're in this little center. And that little hole in the middle, we're going to fill in with some country red. There's our 3 layers. Take this up away from the glare. So just a simple little flower. And if you wanted to do this with the filbert brush, let me switch to that and show you again with matte medium. And again, I'm going to start with the red. So you can let the round curve of the filbert brush create the ends of the petals, the tips of the petals. So I'm just going to set my brush down. It's a little wet here. This is why we seal our paper to begin with, so we don't have a lot of wet soaked into the paper. So that's why the purpose of the gesso. Okay, so I'm going to just let the fullness of my filbert down. See how I'm flattening it out? And then I'm just going to pull in and work right around. I'm going to flatten out and pull in, flatten, pull in. Just work all the way around the circle. So this one is more opaque because we're not floating. You can still see the text through, but it's much darker. Sorry, I keep moving out of the camera. Okay, I'm gonna pick up the matte medium again in the pink, just like we did with the first flower. And the same thing. So with the filbert brush, I'm purposely setting my brush down between two petals, just because this is a much fuller petal. So set down, pull in, just again, working your way right around. Take the time to set the bristle down so that you get that nice round shape. Okay, there's layer number 2. And let's see, I'm gonna again go to a smaller brush for the inside petals, and I'm just gonna pick up Moon Yellow. And same thing. These are gonna be quite a bit smaller than the ones that we floated, but we still get the same look in the end. Oh, you can compare the two, similar and yet different. And then in that center, just a little scruffy brush, or I showed them how you just use the flat brush and the chisel today to just get a little red in the center of your flower. So we're just going to tap that in to fill in the center. And if you wanted to put a little yellow for pollen or something in the middle, you could add some little tiny dots. But that's how we did the zinnias. Okay. And then let's come back to our heart. Let me back my camera off. Next step for the heart is to put on tissue transfer. So in your instructions, your prep instructions, I had you trace the clover and the basil onto tissue paper. This is just tissue paper like you would use if you're giving someone a gift and you're filling a gift bag. Just regular old tissue paper. There's a matte side and there's a shiny side, and we work with the matte side facing up. And this is traced on with an ink, a permanent ink pen, a pigment ink pen. So like the Pigma Micron pens, I love the Tombow Fudinowski pens. They're my favorite. So I'm going to tear the tissue down to a size that's a little easier to work with, and I'm going to show you how to get these elements off. We use the tissue just again, we're all about the layers, and this is a nice contrast to all the color that we're going to put on, having the black ink elements in here. Although we're going to tint them, I don't always do that. A lot of times my projects have just black kind of like illustrations in the background. This time we're tinting them. So I'm just taking a round brush, you can use a liner brush, and I'm sort of painting a line around the clover, and because I want to tear these out. And the water line makes it very easy to tear the paper. And we want to tear these and not cut them, because when you tear, you get this edge and the fibers are all pulled apart. So it's thinning down. And when we apply this to our project, you won't see the tissue will just disappear. But if you cut them with scissors, you can't really mask that edge, the straight edge that the scissor blade makes, and you'll see the edges of the tissue paper, which we don't want. Pull all of these off. And since this is just an overview, I think I'm not going to pull all of them off after I just said that. Let me just get a couple off so I can show you how to put them on. And the basil. While I'm doing this, I'm just going to paint all the way around it. And then again, tear it out. And I like to kind of get as close to my ink lines as I can because it's less tissue paper to work with on the project. Even though it disappears, still, if we have less, the less we have on the paper, the less we're trying to kind of disguise or mask when we put it down. Okay, let me just get rid of those. And have a bit hanging on here, so let me get that off. And I would normally take the time to get a little closer. But for now, for the sake of showing you how to put these things down, I'm not going to get too fussy with it. Okay, so here's my background paper. Let me show you the finished project again. So the clover is in the background behind the zinnias, and there's a sprig of it here. There's a couple of sprigs over here on the right side. You can position yours any way you want. It doesn't have to look like mine in the end. But what I'm going to do is go into my matte medium, and I'm going to put a pretty generous layer of matte medium down. Okay, you see how much that is, and I want to make sure I have an area covered that's larger than the tissue that I'm putting down, so I don't have any air under the tissue. And then I'm going to take one of Clover's and just gently set it down. I'm not going to press it down yet. I'm just going to touch in the center, and that way I can position it where I want it. So I kind of want this to follow the shape of the heart. And then once I have it in place, I'm going to just use my brush and sort of tap it into the matte medium. Again, I want to make sure that I don't have any tissue laying against the surface that does not have matte medium underneath it, because we need the tissue to become fully saturated with the matte medium. After that, you use your fingers and just very gently kind of squeegee the excess medium out from beneath the tissue. And you'll see it, you'll see the tissue just disappear. See that? It just disappears right into the background. We need to make sure that we have all of the excess out, and you're feeling, when you do this, feeling for any air or any bubbles. But the biggest thing is to just push it out and always work from the center out so that you don't disturb it. If I start here and I slide upward, I could wrinkle the tissue or move my piece, which I don't want to do. So I'm always working from the middle of the item out to the edges. Okay, so we would do this for both pieces. And I'm just going to grab a different brush here because that one wasn't the greatest. So let's get one more down here. I'll show you one more time. A good amount of matte medium. And just gently set it down until I get it positioned where I want it. Make sure that I've got matte medium underneath everything, and then just very gently start to brush it down. And the reason I'm brushing it down really is to get matte medium on the surface of the tissue also. So there's matte medium below and on the surface, and that way my fingers can kind of glide. If you don't have any matte medium on the surface and you try to squeegee it out, it's easy to tear the tissue. With the matte medium on there, your fingers just slide right across, and you'll just feel it start to stick down because it might want to move on you, and then all of a sudden it's down, and you can put a little extra pressure if you need to. And then baby wipes for your fingers, because matte medium is so sticky. By the time we finish the project, you're trying to get the matte medium off and you're sticking to things. So baby wipes come in handy, of course. And then just brush your surface to smooth everything all out, so you don't have any fingerprints or ridges from the matte medium. And at this step, if I'm doing a canvas, I'll just brush right over my whole surface, and that seals everything in from this point down. So if you make a mistake or you get paint where you don't want it, you can wipe off and nothing below the sealed layer will be disturbed. So it's handy. Okay, with the clover on, let's if you're backing paper, you need to let this dry for a second. So let me hit it with a dryer. If your background is not very dark around your clover, you might want to dry brush it with some milk chocolate. We did that in class today because we're going to be putting white on the tips of these little clover petals, and you need that contrast between dark and light for them to show up. So let's dry this. When you use your dryer, keep up away from distance from your project and really move your dryer around. Don't let it rest in one place too long, because you don't want to bubble anything up, and it will make your paper lift if you hold it in one place too long. Okay, so I still have a little milk chocolate on my palette from earlier. So I'm gonna just pick this up in the dry brush and grab a blue shop towel so you can see. I'm gonna just start to offload my brush. I'm twisting between my thumb and my index finger. And while I twist, I'm kind of traveling down the paper towel, and I want to get enough paint off the brush so that I'm just seeing a little haze of color here at the end. And then I'm going to just dry brush this up next to the clovers. And of course, you'll have 3, not 2 on your project. This is just to give a little kind of shadow behind the clover. And as I said, we're going to be tipping our little tiny petals in white, and with the dark behind it, that contrast will really let the clover show up. Okay, so all around, and we're also going to use some matcha green and dry brush now the center of the clovers, so we have a little bit of color on the inside of the clover. Let me just put a little bit, and we'll use the same color to tint the stems. Okay, so I'm going to just pick up matcha green, and I just pinched out my brush. I didn't wash out my dry brush or rinse it out. I just kind of pinched it out. So again, loading and unloading. And I'm going to just dry brush now the center, tint those. Okay. And then a round brush, or slide a flat brush on the chisel. We're going to tint these stems also, and the little leaves. I'm just going to slide my brush down the stem. And those tiny little leaves at the base, get a little tint of color on those. For the clover petals themselves, I'm going to use a flat brush for this. And what one do I want to use? I'll use a number 6 flat. I'm going to have white out on my palette and milk chocolate. I'm not putting you to sleep. I'm talking quietly because of everybody sleeping here, and I feel like I'm probably putting you to sleep too. Okay, I'm going to pull a little white out and just a little touch of milk chocolate out. Brush mix these together so that I have this kind of beigey color. This is going to be the main color of the clover petals, and then I'm going to tip them in white. So I'm going to load one corner of the brush in this beige mix, one corner in white, and I'm not going to blend these together too hard. I'm just going to do just a little press down and lift on the palette, and then I'm going to set this down so that each little petal of the clover is tipped in white. There we go. So the beige is going to be down in and the white up on the tip. And I'm just going to be giving a little gentle wiggle when I set this down. The white up, I'm going to set my brush down and I'm going to just give a little wiggle and a little wiggle. And I'm just working my way around the top first and the sides. This is going to give us that little spiky look that a clover has. You know, it's a round little bundle of petals, but they're very textured and very, I just think of little spikes, even though they're not sharp. But so I'm going to go around the outside, and then I'm going to bring my brush down and do a second row a little down from the first one so that that space becomes like the opening at the top of the flower. And then finally one more row at the bottom, and I'm kind of positioning my brush in between the petals from the previous row. And then you can let some come to the outside. You get that nice, yeah, you get each individual little petal that way. That wasn't hard work. So let's do one more time. I'll come back and just load half my brush in the beige, half in white. Whoops, sorry. Just a little tiny blend. And again, sides and top first. Set the brush down, wiggle, and if you run out of white at any point while you're doing this, just go back to your puddle and just tip in white again. You really want that little white tip. So the green kind of shows through the petals, but it doesn't look green when we're finished. And another row. So the black ink that we outlined in the beginning just gives us a little guide for where to set these down. Okay. And you'll have, of course, like I said, you'll have a third little clover on your project someplace, wherever you wanted to place it. Okay, let me dry this, and then we will get the zinnias cut out and put down. Okay, so I'm going to come back to these guys, and I'm just going to use my little detail scissors, and I'm going to rough cut them first. We have this little bit of fussy cutting to do. We're going to cut out the teeny little paper flowers that go on that are like 3D flowers, but they are not, they're just a quick cut. They're sort of like when we make paper snowflakes, because we're going to fold them and get all of our petals at one time. But the zinnias we do need to cut. But once you rough cut, you can kind of go quickly by just, instead of turning the scissor, you're more pivoting the paper. And that lets you just zip right around pretty quickly. Just going down in, whoops, I lost my plate here. So around, and I'm just going to turn the paper. So I know cutting is not so exciting to watch, but hopefully you're cutting your own too. Okay, there's one. And we're going to adhere these to our surface with matte medium a little differently than the tissue because this is paper to paper. So the tissue gets saturated very easily, and that's why we don't put any matte medium on the back of it. We just set it in the matte medium. But when we're doing any other papers, we brush the back of the paper and the surface, whether it's like today we're doing this paper project, but you could be doing this on any surface. You could do it on wood, do it on canvas. Those. So the zinnias are kind of the center of our flowers. So one kind of falls down here. If we think about, here's the point of the heart. Let me put my brush across. Okay, so here's the center. So we're going to let one kind of fall down towards the bottom and one kind of up at the top. But again, you can feel free to arrange these any way you would like. I'm going to let mine live kind of like this. And let me grab my index again. So we're going to brush some matte medium on the back of the paper. And yes, they're going to curl a little bit. It's okay. And then we're going to brush matte medium onto our surface. So one's going to kind of be down here in the doily area and one up here at the top. And again, it's a pretty generous coat, maybe not quite as much as when we do tissue, but and then set your flower. Again, I'm not going to press it down yet until I have it positioned because you might want to change the way your text is or change the position. So get them where you want them first. And by touching only the center, you've got all this time to move them around wherever you want. I think I do want mine there. And then I'm going to brush gently down with that matte medium in my brush. And then, yes, back to the fingers. Start in the center and just press the excess out. Hopefully you can see that even in the camera. Pressing it out. And if you get paper that lifts or you get little bubbles, that usually is a sign that you didn't have enough matte medium underneath to begin with. Because if you have dry pockets underneath, it's going to end up a bubble. So it's not always that you didn't get the matte medium all squeegeed out. It could be that there wasn't enough under there to begin with. Don't be stingy. Don't be stingy with a matte medium. Okay, there's the zinnias down. And the basil. I don't have to wait for the zinnias to dry. I can go ahead and put more matte medium. The basil goes right between these two flowers. So I'm going to put a pretty good amount down and I'm going to position the basil where I want it. And just gently again brush that down. And once it's brushed down, go from the center out and get all of the excess medium squished out from that piece. And you'll again see the tissue paper just disappear right in front of your eyes. Awesome. We have that black inked edge, which we're going to be tinting with light avocado when this dries. But now I'm just going to smooth my surface out again. Get rid of any fingerprints, just like we did before. Okay, now this time I'm going to set this aside to dry. And while that dries, I'm going to show you how to make the little three-dimensional flowers. Okay, so we'll do that and then we'll come back and put the ferns on, I think. So back to our newsprint, and you had in your pattern packet, you had the circle templates for the, you had a large one for the zinnia, and then there was this one that's about the size of a penny. So what we're going to do is just trace one circle on for now. And again, I'm cheating just a little bit. And I'm actually going to make mine a little larger than you guys so you can see a little better in the camera. But just trace one circle. Give a guide for the size. And then we're going to cut our paper into strips. So we have 3 little flowers on the project, and each flower needs 2 layers of petals. So we need 2 circles per flower. So we need 6 circles in total. So I'm just going to cut the one that I have the line drawn on. And then I'm going to use this as a little template for size. So now I have 2 pieces in my stack. So that's going to give me 1 flower. And here's another piece. Another strip down. This is in my stack. This is going to be the second layer for my number 2 flower. And again. And again. So I have 6 pieces, okay, all stacked up. And now when I cut my circle out, I'm going to have 6 circles, cutting out only 1 time. So that's a little trick to save us some cutting time, okay? I'm just going to cut around through the whole stack at once. With my mess. Now keeping my stack all together. So I have 6 pieces here, okay? Keeping my stack all together, I'm going to fold my circles completely in half. Okay. And then let me set this down here so you can see now I have a half circle, but it's all, I still have all the pieces together. And then this stack, I'm going to fold in half. Completely in half again. So now I have like this little wedge. And the center point, I'm going to hold. So I'm going to open this up again so you can see. Here's my half circle. I'm going to fold it in half again. And then this middle, which is the middle of the circle, I'm going to hold in my fingers. I don't want to cut that. But these, the left and right sides here, I'm just going to kind of round those over to soften so they're not so pointy. See how this one comes to a sharp point? So I'm just going to round this over. And when I unroll this, this is going to create the little petals. And then also this outside edge, I'm just going to cut a little curve down and back out. And as one of the girls said today, you kind of have a teeny tiny little heart after doing this. So this curve, there's no right or wrong to this. It's just to give a little tiny bit of shape to the petal. Let me hold it up so you can see. So here's my piece all together, and let me slowly unfold. Here's my half circle. And then when I open the whole thing up, there's our little petal shapes. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so let me get all my little bits off. Okay, now I'm going to put some tacky glue on my palette where I'm not going to get a brush into it. Yes, that's a reminder for my own self. There we go. And we're going to use the end of a small brush. In here again. Okay, so I'm going to take one layer of petals and I'm going to set my brush handle right in the center. Okay, and I'm just going to gently crimp the paper around the brush handle. Okay, just kind of bending it up around the handle. And then this end that is the bottom side where the handle is, I'm going to set in my tacky glue and get a little glue on the end. And then I'm going to take another layer of petals and I'm going to set this in the center of that. And again, kind of bring it up around my brush and give it just a little pinch. And when I take my brush out, I have this tiny little flower, which I'm not going to open up yet because I want the glue to dry. But when the glue sets up and you spread the petals out, you get these cute little paper flowers. See that? But we want to let them dry first, so they don't look like much yet, but once you open them out, they will. So there's one, and we're going to do this for 3 flowers. So I'm just going to set my brush in the center, and I'm just kind of press down, and it starts to bend up around the handle, and then just pinch it just gently. You don't want your brush handle to go through. Mine did that earlier today. And then I'm going to touch that into glue and set it in the center of another petal. And the reason I'm giving that pinch is just to crimp them and hold them together. And you could keep the bottom petal flat and only crimp the middle and it would look, you get a look of a different flower. It would be sort of like a daffodil with that outer collar. But we're not doing daffodils. I don't know if daffodils had a Victorian meaning, so I don't know what they are. But I was telling the girls too, you could paint these different colors for different flowers. I'm taking a lot of artistic license when I call them coreopsis because they have like a daisy petal. And ours don't look like that, but I'm getting the color, the happy yellow color from it. But you could use violets. What did violet mean? Faithfulness. That's nice. Or sweet pea means goodbye, but that's kind of a permanent goodbye. So sweet pea wasn't such a nice flower. Okay. So with these 3 out of the way, we're going to just set this aside to dry. And turn my palette. You can see my puddle here. It's dry from earlier, but we're going to now put on the little fern fronds here. They kind of come down. So these are texture paste or modeling paste I actually used. You can use texture paste though. And you can use a regular round palette knife, or you can use, I'm going to use a triangle blade. Come on. I say that I am. Maybe I'm going to use this one. I have nobody to blame this on but myself, but I don't know how I can work here and then end up missing things I'm looking for. So I don't see my triangle knife, which is kind of strange. Okay, well, I don't want to hold things up. So I'm going to get a little modeling paste out, put that down on my palette. We're going to use light avocado for the fern. So I'm going to put this down. Now the modeling paste, even though it looks white, it's not white. It's going to dry clear. So when you start to blend this together, the color can seem like it's playing a little bit with the light avocado, making it lighter, but it's not going to dry that way because it's not white in reality. Okay, there's that. The crazy about my other palette knife because I like the way the little triangle blade works. Maybe I'll switch to the full-time one. Okay, so let me show you on a scrap what we're going to do. I use both so you can see. And if you have other tools, oh, there's my other palette knife right there in front of my eyes. Okay, we're going to pick up a little bit of texture medium on our knife, and we're just going to touch it to the surface. Now, I'm making a big piece of fern for the sake of the camera, and then I'll show you how small we're going to do it. So with this on your surface, then you're just going to turn your palette knife and drag the blade through, and that's going to give you this one little leaf, which doesn't look like much on its own, but when you put its neighbor down next to it and then drag through and then go up above and drag through, and again a little more for that one. These do gradually get smaller and smaller, but okay. And so I'll do it again, and this time I'll put them down a little bit smaller, a little less medium. Drag that up. Aren't they cute? And then again, and maybe I'll start to curve this way and then drag my point. And then little teeny guy at the end. Okay. Hold it this way. And actually it would be kind of coming down this way. Isn't that cute? So let's go to a little bit smaller blade and bring my actual paper out. So these are going to fall out. Here's the sample. These kind of fall up and down, again, wherever you want to fill in your space. So they're coming out from behind the flower cluster though. So I'm going to pick it up on the back side of my blade, and let's do one over here in this space. I'm just going to touch down, and you can actually touch down both sets of leaves at one time and then drag your knife through. Okay, there's one little set of leaves, and then go to the next set, touch down, and drag the blade through. Just like we did it on the card, and then you can just shape them however you want them to fall. If I want mine to start bending this way, then I'm just going to turn the angle of my blade and the way I set them down, and I'm going to start dragging in this direction. If I wanted it to go up, I could push them the other way. It's a little big for that area, so I'm just going to take a little bit of it off. And then drag through. Now, some of the girls today had a stencil, fern stencil, and decided to stencil the fern on. That's totally fine too. Do what you like to do. I love the texture taste because gives us more, something a little more interesting on the surface and unusual. And when it dries, it's standing up from the surface and you have all that goodness. Okay, that's that. So let me bring this back and see if I've gone over everything. Okay, so we have the basil in the center. That's just going to be tinted with the light avocado. And you can just side load a brush and float that on just like you would normally do. So let me just put a little matte medium in my brush. Clean this one out just a little. Okay. So just a little corner load to tint that. So a little matte medium. Blend it out. Just need a little touch of color on this. Just on the corner, blend it out. And then just like we would normally float. So we're pushing the color against the edge of the basil leaves and letting the inside stay on the bright side. And so the basil is in little clusters and there's 2 big leaves, 2 little leaves. And so we're going to tint the whole thing. And I did both top and bottom edges. So I did one side and then let it dry and then came back and did the other. Okay, and you can see how the color is going to go on. And this is how it ends up. So it's all tinted. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we did. The love you have in your packet of printables. I gave a couple of sizes there. You can play with the arrangement if you want to have it go across the bottom. Here's the one that I did in class today. Okay, so mine went right across the bottom. My original one kind of was offset. Some of the girls today came down the side. That was really cute. And then we have some little curly cues, white curly cues here just with a liner brush and little dip dots around the edges with the handle end of your brush. And then once your flowers are set up, you're going to glue them to your canvas with tacky glue wherever you want them and use your brush handle to kind of set them down like so. Let them totally dry. And once they dry, then you can tint the petals and then they'll really come to life. You can gently open them up like this and then tint them with whatever color you want. I did moon yellow on mine and I touched white into the center for a flower center. Some of the girls today did little pearls in the center of their flowers. They were super cute. So add any other little embellishments on that you want. I used buttons on mine, old buttons, and then I punched a hole in the top and hung it with ribbon. So if you're going to do something like that, you can hang it or put it in a tiered tray. You could adhere the whole thing to the front of a card and have a very special Valentine card for someone. Or like I said, this can be done on wood, on a plaque instead of on the cardstock. It can be done on canvas. So all kinds of creative ways you can just take the idea and run with it. So I hope that helps those of you who were not able to attend the class. Let me turn my camera for a second here. I can figure this out. I'm always trying to remember where my buttons are. Okay, so yeah, I hope that helps. If you have any questions, go ahead and post in the group or feel free to message me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I think I didn't, let me just show you. This is the matte medium that I've been using, Liquitex Fluid Matte Medium. And the tacky glue that I used, Crafter's Pick the Ultimate. You can use any tacky glue. I really like crafter's pick. And then I think I did show you the texture. The modeling paste is Decor Media Line. And you can use their decoupage matte also as in place of matte medium. Works really well. So I hope that helps, and I will sign off now, and hopefully you guys can get your projects finished up and add them to all the beauties that are in the group. I'll see you later, guys. I'm gonna head to bed, and I hope that you are too. Bye.